People often claim that the most convincing lies are the ones we tell ourselves. Looking back, I realize I had been living inside one for years. I kept convincing myself that I was simply being careful, that the locked closet in my apartment was nothing more than a storage space, and that slipping into a pair of heels after work was nothing more than an innocent escape. It was easier to believe those stories than to question what they truly meant. Everything changed on a quiet Saturday afternoon. The moment began with a sharp tap of a high heel against the hardwood floor. Before I had time to react, I heard the front door unlock. It opened far earlier than I expected. My name is Samia, and I work as a junior architect. My profession revolves around precision, straight lines, careful measurements, and designing spaces where other people build their lives. Every detail matters. My own life, however, is far less polished. I live alone in a modest studio apartment only a short walk from the office. A neglected houseplant sits by the window, architecture magazines are stacked neatly on a shelf, and hidden beneath my bed is a collection of clothes that no one knows exist. To everyone around me, I am dependable and predictable. Friends describe me as organized. My girlfriend, Isabella, believes I'm someone who values routine, remembers every important date, and finds comfort in stability. Yet behind closed doors, another side of me quietly comes alive. When the outside world fades away and I'm completely alone, I allow myself to become someone softer, someone less restricted by expectations. Those private moments began as simple curiosity. I never imagined they would become so meaningful. The first time I applied lipstick, I barely recognized my reflection. A touch of mascara brightened my tired eyes, and suddenly I saw a version of myself that felt strangely authentic. It wasn't about pretending to be someone else. Instead, it felt like discovering a part of myself that had always been waiting beneath the surface. At first, I dismissed it as nothing more than a harmless hobby, a private ritual that balanced the rigid structure of my everyday life. But small secrets have a way of growing. What begins as curiosity eventually demands honesty. Isabella would probably describe me as practical. She loves planning ahead, appreciates reliability, and enjoys knowing exactly where life is heading. We met 2 years earlier at an art exhibition. She stood across the gallery wearing a striking red dress, laughing with friends as though she carried sunlight wherever she went. I admired her confidence immediately. While I spent my days creating buildings, she worked in the art world, surrounded by people who openly explored emotion and self-expression. Despite our differences, our relationship felt effortless. We built comfortable routines together, quiet dinners, lazy weekends, shared traditions. I loved how stable everything seemed. Perhaps too stable. She never questioned the parts of me I kept hidden, and I convinced myself that silence was the same as honesty. Deep down, though, I knew there was a difference between protecting privacy and hiding the truth. Secrets always leave sharp edges. Eventually, they find a way to cut through everything you've carefully built. Then it happened. A metallic scrape echoed through the apartment, the unmistakable sound of a key sliding into the front door. Every thought in my head disappeared. My entire body stiffened as icy fear spread through me. I knew that sound better than any other. There was no room for doubt. She was home. My pulse exploded in my ears. For one desperate moment, I clung to impossible hopes. Maybe she had forgotten something outside. Maybe she wouldn't come in. Maybe fate would give me one more minute. It didn't. The handle slowly turned. Time seemed to lose all meaning. My thoughts screamed at me to move, to tear off the wig, wipe away the makeup, hide the dress, do anything, but panic had frozen every muscle. The heels locked me in place. The dress couldn't disappear. The person staring back from the mirror couldn't simply vanish because I wanted them to. I was out of time. The door opened just enough for a beam of light from the hallway to spill across the floor. Her silhouette appeared in the doorway, and in that instant, every wall I had built around my secret came crashing down. There was nowhere left to hide. The door swung fully open. Our eyes met. Her expression shifted almost instantly. Surprise gave way to disbelief, disbelief to confusion, and confusion to a silence filled with emotions neither of us could explain. It felt as though the years I had spent hiding collapsed into a single heartbeat. She stared at me before whispering, almost to herself, "Samia?" Neither of us moved. She remained by the entrance with one hand resting on the doorknob, while I stood rooted to the floor, my trembling hand pressed against my chest as if I could somehow steady the chaos inside me. The silence between us carried more weight than words ever could. Her eyes wandered across every detail, the borrowed heels, the uneven wig, the lipstick, the dress, and the nervous way I struggled to stand. She wasn't just seeing my appearance. She was seeing the truth I had hidden from her for so long. Finally, she broke the silence. How long has this been part of your life? I opened my mouth, desperate to answer, but nothing came out. I didn't know how to explain something I was still trying to understand myself. Was it curiosity? Identity? Comfort? I couldn't even define it for myself. The only words I managed were barely audible. I'm sorry. She blinked slowly. Sorry for what? The question hurt far more than anger ever could. Sorry for hiding? For borrowing her clothes? For letting fear keep me silent? Or simply for being someone she never expected? I couldn't answer. She stepped inside and quietly closed the door behind her. The gentle click echoed through the apartment like the closing of a chapter. As she approached, the room suddenly felt much smaller. Without thinking, I stepped backward. My heels clicked awkwardly against the wooden floor, making every movement feel louder than it really was. The wig felt unbearably heavy. The lipstick suddenly tasted bitter. The dress, which moments ago had made me feel free, now felt like a prison. Take a slow breath, she said softly. Only then did I realize I had almost stopped breathing. I inhaled sharply, struggling to steady myself. She instinctively lifted her hand as though she wanted to comfort me, but before her fingers reached my shoulder, she hesitated and slowly lowered it again. That tiny pause hurt more than any harsh words could have. She wanted to help. She simply didn't know if she still could. Questions filled her eyes, questions neither of us knew how to answer. My knees trembled beneath me. Please, sit down, she said gently, slipping into the caring voice I had known my entire life. I shook my head. If I sat down, everything would become real. I never wanted you to find out like this, I whispered. She let out a slow breath before quietly asking, then when were you planning to let me meet the real you? The words struck deep. The real me? Which version was that? The one standing before her now? Or the one who had spent years pretending nothing was different? I honestly didn't know. She looked at me for a long moment, searching my face as if she were trying to recognize both the child she had raised and the person standing before her. Then she asked another question. Why my clothes? I hesitated before answering. They make me feel different. She frowned, not with anger, but genuine confusion. Different in what way? I lowered my eyes. They make me feel calmer, more complete, like I'm closer to myself than I ever am outside. The silence that followed no longer felt hostile. It felt thoughtful. She was listening. Slowly, she took another step toward me. Her gaze softened as she noticed the trembling in my hands and the uncertainty written across my face. After another pause, she carefully asked, "Do you feel like you're a girl?" I closed my eyes. Not because the question offended me, but because I didn't know the answer. I don't know, I admitted. I don't always feel like a boy. I don't always feel like a girl either. I just feel like me. She absorbed those words quietly. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "I wish you had trusted me enough to tell me." Fear tightened in my chest. I thought you'd think something was wrong with me. You thought I'd think you were strange. I thought you'd think I was broken. Her eyes immediately filled with emotion. She stepped a little closer this time. "Listen to me," she said gently. "You are not broken." Her voice trembled as she continued. "You're frightened. You're trying to understand yourself. And you're carrying all of this alone. No one should have to do that." The kindness in her words shattered the last of my composure. Tears blurred my vision. "I didn't want to disappoint you." She slowly shook her head. "My child, you could never disappoint me." She paused, swallowing hard. "What hurts is knowing you believed you had to hide this from me. That thought breaks my heart." I quickly wiped my eyes. "You didn't do anything wrong." She wasn't convinced. Although she spoke with compassion, I could still sense the storm building beneath the surface. Questions remained unanswered. Fears lingered between us. Neither of us knew what tomorrow would look like. The silence returned, thicker than before. The apartment suddenly felt too small to hold everything we were feeling. She continued watching me, not with judgment, but with a desperate desire to understand. Even so, her gaze made me feel exposed. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. Each careful step backward made my heels click against the wood like tiny confessions I couldn't take back. My breathing grew shallow again. My heart pounded so fiercely I thought she might hear it. Finally, she spoke once more. "Samia," she said gently but firmly, "come and sit with me." I hesitated. Sitting down meant accepting that there was no more pretending. But remaining where I stood offered no protection either. For the first time in years, there was nowhere left to hide. "If you'd like, I can rewrite the rest of the story in the same original style so the entire manuscript reads consistently and uniquely." I slowly eased myself onto the sofa. The fabric of the dress brushed lightly against my legs, while the heels pressed uncomfortably against my feet, a constant reminder that every decision leaves its mark. She settled into the chair across from me, leaving enough space between us to feel cautious but not distant. Every movement she made was measured, as though she feared one careless step might shatter the fragile moment we shared. It struck me then that we were both balancing on uncertain ground. The difference was that my fear came from hiding who I was, while hers came from loving someone she no longer fully understood. Silence settled over the room. At last, she spoke. "I never expected this," she admitted quietly before stopping to gather her thoughts. "I noticed little changes over the years. Small things that seemed different. But I never imagined it had become something this important." Her words hung between us like delicate glass, beautiful, yet ready to break with the slightest pressure. I searched for the right explanation. "I never wanted this to hurt you," I said softly. "I wasn't trying to rebel or disrespect anyone." I looked down at my hands. I just wanted to know what it felt like to be myself, even if it was only when no one else was around. She breathed in slowly, letting my words settle before responding. "So you kept it hidden because you were embarrassed?" she asked. "Or because you thought I wouldn't understand?" I hesitated. "A little of both." I met her eyes. "I wasn't afraid of you. I was afraid of what this might mean. Afraid people would judge me before I even understood myself." She leaned back and folded her hands together, thinking carefully. "I've always known you were imaginative," she said with a faint smile. "You were the child who could spend hours creating stories and inventing entire worlds." Her expression softened. "But this isn't imagination anymore." She paused. "This is something deeply personal." I nodded. "Yes." For the first time, I realized I wasn't simply playing a role anymore. I was revealing a part of myself that had lived in silence for years. Her attention shifted to my shoes. "Those heels," she murmured. "They are mine." A wave of guilt washed over me. "I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking." "No," she replied gently. "You weren't." Her tone wasn't angry, just truthful. After another quiet moment, she surprised me. "But there's something I can't ignore." I looked up. "You seem comfortable." The words caught me completely off guard. "I've never seen you stand with that kind of confidence before." She looked almost puzzled by her own observation. "You're nervous, yes. But underneath that, there's a strength I haven't seen." I didn't know how to respond. Confidence wasn't something I usually associated with myself. Yet hearing her say it sparked a tiny feeling of relief. For a brief moment, I felt understood. The feeling faded almost as quickly as it came. Would Isabella ever see me that way? Or would she only see someone she'd no longer recognize? The afternoon sunlight stretched across the room, catching the polished heels and the folds of the dress. Long shadows spread across the floor like cracks slowly forming through everything I had tried to keep together. After several quiet moments, my mother spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Are you happy when you like this?" The question caught me completely unprepared. Happy. It felt too simple for something so complicated. I searched for the answer before finally speaking. "I think so." My voice barely rose above a whisper. "When I'm dressed like this, I feel lighter." I paused. "I don't feel like I'm pretending." She watched me carefully. A flicker of understanding crossed her face before concern replaced it. "But are you safe?" Her question was gentle, not accusing. You know people aren't always kind. Reality returned all at once. I glanced down at my shaking hands. What happens if someone finds out? I asked quietly. What if Isabella does? Her expression softened immediately. Then we'll deal with it together. Her words carried quiet certainty. But promise me something. I looked at her. Don't convince yourself this is only about clothes. She leaned forward. This is about your future, your emotions, and your well-being. I don't want fear deciding how you live your life. The word fear echoed inside me. That was exactly where I had been living. Caught between honesty and secrecy. Between freedom and self-protection. Between the version of myself everyone expected and the one I was only beginning to understand. There was no hiding anymore. Once something has been brought into the light, it can never return to complete darkness. The rest of the afternoon unfolded gently. Neither of us tried to force answers. She asked thoughtful questions, never raising her voice or making me feel ashamed. For the first time, I explained why dressing this way mattered to me. I described the strange sense of peace it brought. How it allowed me to explore parts of myself I had buried for years. How exhausting it was to constantly wonder whether someone would reject me if they ever discovered the truth. She listened without interrupting. Sometimes she nodded. Sometimes she frowned thoughtfully. Sometimes she simply sat in silence, letting my words sink in. Every small reaction reminded me she was trying. Not to change me. To understand me. By evening, nothing had been solved. The uncertainty remained. But fear had slowly begun to transform into conversation. Into curiosity. Into the fragile beginnings of acceptance. I knew our journey was only starting. The difficult part would not be surviving this conversation. It would be learning how to live honestly after someone had finally seen the real me. As she quietly gave me space to think, the apartment suddenly felt unnaturally loud. The distant traffic outside. A floorboard creaking in the neighboring apartment. Even the ticking clock seemed impossible to ignore. Then my phone rang. The sharp ringtone sliced through the silence. I froze. My mother looked toward the sound but stayed perfectly calm. Without saying a word, she reminded me that I wasn't carrying this secret alone anymore. My trembling hand reached for the phone. Even the soft tap of my heel against the floor sounded deafening. Go ahead, she said gently. You should answer. I swallowed hard before looking at the screen. Isabella. My stomach tightened instantly. Not now. Please, not now. I forced myself to answer. Hello. Hey, Isabella said cheerfully. Are you at home? I finished work early. Then she hesitated. Is someone there with you? You sound different. Every muscle in my body tensed. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mother straighten slightly, silently following every word. Yeah, I replied too quickly. I'm just cleaning up. The excuse sounded weak even to me. I'll stop by, Isabella said. 10 minutes, maybe less. Traffic's moving faster than usual. My heart slammed against my ribs. 10 minutes. 10 minutes to decide what happened next. The call ended. I slowly lowered the phone. My mother met my gaze. She didn't panic. She simply gave me a quiet, understanding look. Neither of us needed to say what we were both thinking. Everything was about to change. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand explanations or react with panic. Instead, she looked at me with quiet determination and said, You have 10 minutes. Go. That was all. 10 minutes. The number echoed inside my head like the ticking of a countdown. I sprang into motion, my hands trembling as I pulled the wig from my head. Next came the dress, then the heels. Every second felt precious, every movement rushed but deliberate, as though I were trying to outrun a future that was rapidly catching up with me. The apartment seemed unnaturally loud. The whisper of fabric sliding across my skin. The sharp click of the heels touching the floor. Even my own breathing sounded frantic. Without saying a word, my mother stepped beside me. She handed me my jeans and shirt, quietly gathering the scattered clothes while keeping an anxious eye on the front door. That simple act nearly brought me to tears. She could have turned away. She could have judged me. Instead, she chose to help. Within minutes I had changed back into my usual clothes. Standing before the mirror, I scrubbed away every trace of makeup until the familiar face the world expected stared back at me once again. The careful, dependable version of Samia had returned. At least on the outside. Inside, nothing had changed. The person who had existed only moments earlier, the one wrapped in silk, balanced in heels, and finally feeling authentic, hadn't disappeared. They were simply hidden once more. The doorbell rang. My heartbeat stumbled. Time had run out. "Are you ready?" my mother asked quietly. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed myself. Taking a slow breath, I opened the door. Isabella smiled warmly, completely unaware of the emotional storm that had swept through the apartment. Seeing her smile filled me with conflicting emotions all at once. Relief. Fear. Guilt. Hope. I welcomed her inside, forcing myself to behave as naturally as possible. Every smile felt rehearsed. Every word required effort. Every movement carried the weight of a secret I desperately wanted to protect. For a few minutes, it almost worked. Then she tilted her head slightly. "You look different today." Her tone was casual, almost playful, but the observation landed like a stone in my stomach. I searched desperately for an answer. "Nothing's wrong," I replied with an uneasy smile. "Just trying something new." She accepted the explanation, but not completely. Her eyes lingered on me just a little too long. I could tell she sensed something beneath the surface. The atmosphere in the apartment tightened again. My mother remained silent, yet her presence reminded me that pretending had become much harder. The truth was no longer safely hidden. It was waiting just beneath every sentence I spoke. As Isabella chatted about her afternoon, I answered automatically, barely hearing my own words. My thoughts were somewhere else. Every glance she gave me felt like another question. Every pause felt dangerous. It wasn't my mother I feared anymore. She already knew. Now my greatest fear was Isabella. She was the one whose opinion mattered most. The one person capable of breaking my heart without ever intending to. Needing an escape, I excused myself and walked into the kitchen. The moment I was alone, I rested both hands against the counter and closed my eyes. My reflection stared back at me through the dark kitchen window. The makeup was gone. The dress was gone. The heels were gone. Yet I still felt exposed. Like the truth was visible beneath my skin. Then my eyes caught something that made my stomach drop. One heel. In the rush to change, we'd forgotten one. It sat quietly near the corner of the room like evidence waiting to be discovered. I froze. At that exact moment I heard Isabella approaching. "You okay?" she called gently. "I'm fine," I answered far too quickly. My pulse hammered against my ribs. She stepped closer. Her eyes drifted toward the floor. Toward the forgotten shoe. She slowed. Her expression shifted ever so slightly. "Is that?" Before she could finish, I instinctively moved between her and the heel. "Oh, that's just a shoe," I blurted out, my voice much louder than intended. The excuse sounded ridiculous the moment it left my mouth. She looked from the heel to my face. Then back again. Her gaze sharpened. Not accusing. Simply observant. I felt as though she could hear every anxious thought racing through my mind. After a long pause, a faint smile appeared on her lips. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't amused. It was thoughtful. "You're hiding something," she said softly. The words weren't spoken as an accusation. They sounded more like a quiet realization. My mouth went dry. "No," I replied too quickly. "Not at all." Even I didn't believe myself. The heating system clicked on, filling the silence with an ordinary mechanical sound that somehow made me jump. Isabella barely noticed. Her attention never left me. The room suddenly felt smaller. The walls closer. The air heavier. Every second stretched endlessly. Every tick of the clock sounded louder than the last. Standing there, I realized something I had spent years refusing to admit. Part of me wanted her to know. Not because I enjoyed the fear. Because I wanted someone I loved to truly see me. To understand. To accept me. That desire frightened me almost as much as rejection itself. My eyes drifted back toward the abandoned heel. It had become more than a forgotten shoe. It was the symbol of everything I had tried to keep hidden. My two lives balanced on opposite sides of a single moment. Fear and hope collided inside me until I could barely breathe. Then another sound echoed through the apartment. The front door unlocked. A key turned. My heart sank. Someone else had arrived. The door opened. It wasn't Isabella this time. It was my aunt, Navala. She stepped inside, paused, and immediately noticed the unusual tension filling the room. Her eyes swept across the apartment before settling on me. Although I had changed clothes, traces of the hurried transformation remained, a faint smear of lipstick near my jaw, the discarded wig lying half-hidden nearby, and the unmistakable scent of perfume lingering in the air. She frowned. Samia. Her voice was calm but edged with concern. What's going on here? I opened my mouth to explain. Nothing came out. Before the silence became unbearable, my mother stepped beside me. She placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. It's all right, she said gently. Please, let him explain. The simple gesture steadied my breathing. Still, I could feel my carefully protected world beginning to unravel. Every hidden moment. Every secret outfit. Every quiet evening spent discovering parts of myself no one else had seen. All of it was now standing in the open. My aunt studied me carefully. This isn't only about wearing different clothes, is it? Slowly, I shook my head. The truth felt heavier than words. It's something deeper. She glanced at the abandoned heel before looking back at me. So this has been going on for a long time. My mother answered before I could. Yes. She spoke with calm certainty. He's been trying to understand himself. I swallowed hard. It's not pretending, I said quietly. It's the only time I feel free to explore who I really am. My aunt listened without interrupting. Her eyes moved from me to the forgotten shoe and back again. This takes courage, she admitted after a long pause. But it also carries consequences. I nodded. I know. For years every secret had carried that same weight. Every hidden dress. Every careful brushstroke of lipstick. Every cautious step in borrowed heels. They had all led to this moment. I wanted nothing more than to disappear. Instead, I remained where I was, vulnerable and exposed. Then I heard footsteps behind us. I turned. Isabella stood silently in the doorway. No one spoke. The room fell completely still. The next chapter of my life had already begun. Isabella's eyes widened as she took in the scene before her. Her gaze lingered on the heels resting on the floor, the wig clutched tightly in my shaking hands, the faint traces of lipstick still visible on my face, and finally the fear I couldn't hide. Samia, what's happening? She asked softly, though uncertainty colored every word. The room fell into complete silence. It felt as if time itself had stopped. I could feel every pair of eyes fixed on me. My mother's expression held quiet compassion, my aunt watched with guarded concern, and Isabella searched my face, desperate for answers. Years of carefully guarded secrets suddenly stood exposed beneath the bright light of reality. There was nowhere left to run. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe. I need you to hear me out, I began, my voice trembling. This isn't about trying to fool anyone or becoming someone else. I paused, gathering what little courage I had left. This is simply another part of me. When I'm alone, I allow myself to be completely honest with who I am. The confession settled over the room. No one interrupted. The silence was almost louder than words. After a long moment, Aunt Navala let out a slow breath. That took courage, she said quietly. Maybe more courage than caution. My mother gently wrapped her fingers around my hand. You've always followed your own path, she said with a reassuring smile. I may not understand every part of this journey, but I love you, and that isn't going to change. A weight I had carried for years eased ever so slightly. For the first time, the truth existed outside my own mind. It was terrifying. It was also strangely freeing. Then Isabella stepped closer. Her eyes never left mine. So you've been keeping this from me? She asked calmly. I nodded. I was afraid. Afraid I'd leave. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Afraid I'd stop loving you. I lowered my head. Yes. She stood silently for a few seconds before speaking again. I won't pretend I understand everything, she admitted. I have questions. A lot of them. She smiled sadly. But I'd rather learn the truth than spend my life knowing only the version of you that felt safe to show me. Her words caught me completely off guard. Relief rushed through me, tangled with fear and uncertainty. Nothing had been solved. Yet nothing had fallen apart either. For years I had imagined this moment ending in rejection. Instead, it had become the beginning of an honest conversation. The apartment seemed suspended in time. No one hurried to speak. Every heartbeat echoed in my ears. Then another sound broke the silence. The front door opened again. My chest tightened instantly. Another visitor. Before anyone could react, Uncle Fel stepped inside. He looked around the room, immediately sensing something unusual. "What happened here?" he asked, studying each of us in turn. His eyes eventually settled on me. The wig still rested in my hands. The forgotten heels remained on the floor. The faint stain of lipstick hadn't completely disappeared. Without anyone saying a word, he understood that he had walked into the middle of something important. I can explain," I stammered. Before I could continue, Aunt Navala spoke. "There's something Samir needs to tell us." The room became even quieter. Uncle Fel crossed his arms, waiting patiently. My mother gave my hand another reassuring squeeze. "You don't have to hide anymore," she whispered. I took a deep breath. "For a long time," I began slowly, "I've dressed like this when I'm alone." I looked down briefly before continuing. "It helps me express parts of myself that I've never known how to explain." No one interrupted. "I never wanted to shock anyone," I continued. "I wasn't trying to embarrass the family. I just feel more complete when I allow myself to explore this side of who I am." The words finally existed outside my heart. Uncle Fel remained silent for several moments. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than angry. "I won't pretend I fully understand," he admitted. "But I can see this isn't some joke or impulsive decision." He looked directly at me. "This clearly matters to you." I nodded. "It does." He sighed. "Then we start by listening." The tension eased just enough for everyone to breathe again. Even so, uncertainty still filled the room. Nothing about this conversation was simple. As I stood there, my phone suddenly lit up on the kitchen counter. A notification appeared across the screen. An urgent message from work. Normally I would have answered immediately. Instead, it felt insignificant compared to everything unfolding around me. Isabella stepped closer until we were standing only a few feet apart. "I don't care about the clothes," she said softly. "I care about you." She paused. "But no more hiding. No more pretending to be someone you're not." Emotion tightened my throat. Before I could answer, my mother spoke firmly. "He's trusted us with something deeply personal. Now it's our turn to show him the same trust." Aunt Navala glanced toward the window. "What if someone else finds out?" she asked carefully. "The neighbors, friends, people who don't understand." The question echoed every fear I had carried for years. I looked around the room. My mother's quiet support. My aunt's cautious concern. Uncle Fel's willingness to listen. Isabella's determination to understand. For the first time, I wasn't carrying the weight of my secret alone. Then another knock echoed through the apartment. Everyone turned toward the door. The room fell silent once again. I had the unmistakable feeling that another chapter of my life was about to begin.